Welcome to Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop. Coming up, we'll review the week's top stories about the contrast between Chicago and New York City's handling of the incoming Trump administration and mass deportations, and what residents have to say about it. And we'll hear some of the tapes being revealed in the ongoing corruption trial of former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan. I'll then join the Center Square's Dan McCaleb to further discuss those stories and more. That's ahead with Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop.
Do you know what elected officials in Illinois are doing with your tax dollars? Do you want to make sure that your voice is heard? If so, then you need Blue Room Stream, a live and archived video streaming service that provides access to government meetings and events. With Blue Room Stream, you can watch how your elected officials make decisions, hold them accountable for their actions, and be a more informed citizen. Blue Room Stream is the perfect way to get involved in the democratic process and to make a difference in your community. Subscribe today at blueroomstream.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop. Two of the country's largest cities are taking different approaches to the incoming Trump administration's aim of deporting violent non-citizens. President-elect Donald Trump takes office January 20th. He's promised on day one to take action on border security and mass deportations. New York City Mayor Eric Adams this week blasted the Biden administration's handling of the border, allowing millions into the country and costing New York taxpayers $6.4 billion.
We all should be angry at what happened to our city under this administration.
Adams said he's going to sit down with Trump's border officials this week to discuss deportation efforts. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson said he hasn't talked with Trump officials yet and brushed aside the idea of working with immigration officials.
Asking police officers to behave as ICE agents is antithetical to building community trust.
Chicago resident P. Ray Eastley said state and city officials should step aside. The residents are calling ICE.
See something and say something today. We don't care that Brandon said that they're not going to help. We're going to help the citizens of Chicago, the people who pay into the $25 billion ICE budget.
Illinois has received about 55,000 non-citizen migrants since August 2022, costing Illinois taxpayers more than $1 billion. And one of Michael Madigan's former chiefs of staff has testified at the former Illinois House Speaker's bribery and racketeering trial. Jim Talamonte has that story.
Jessica Basham worked for Democrats in the State House for 18 years and was Madigan's chief of staff from 2018 to 2021. In a recording dated March 25, 2019, Madigan and Basham discussed State Representative Bob Rita and gaming legislation.
You have a conversation with Rita and make sure you understand that you just can't sit there like a bump on a log.
Madigan mentioned State Representative Chris Welch, who replaced Madigan as Speaker in 2021.
Is Rita the vice chair of the committee?
He is.
Well, and maybe what Welch wants to do is to turn over the chair to Rita for this purpose.
Prosecutors said Illinois U.S. Representative Nikki Budzinski may be called to testify next Monday. I'm Jim Talamonte.
And those are the top stories from the past week from Illinois. Find more online at thecentersquare.com. Coming up for Illinois in Focus, I'll join the Center Square's Dan McCaleb to further discuss the news. This is Illinois in Focus, a production of America's Talking Network. I'm Greg Bishop.
Tired of being in the dark about what happens day to day under the dome in Springfield? Do you want to be more informed in the decision-making process? If so, you need Blue Room Stream, a live and archived video streaming service that provides access to government meetings and events. With Blue Room Stream, you can watch elected officials in action, holding them accountable, and having your say on issues that matter most to you. Blue Room Stream is the perfect way to stay informed about Illinois state government and to be a more engaged citizen. Become a subscriber today at blueroomstream.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Dan McCaleb, Chief Content Officer at Franklin News Foundation, publisher of the Center Square Newswire service. We are recording this on Thursday, December 5th. After a two-day break during the Thanksgiving holiday, the corruption trial of longtime former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan resumed this week, with several new witnesses taking the stand and new secret recordings of Madigan, co-defendant Michael McLean, and others played in court. Joining me to discuss this and more is Greg Bishop, Illinois Associate Editor at the Center Square. Greg, tell us about what jurors heard this week.
So this week, jurors heard the wrap-up of former Chicago Alderman Daniel Solis, who provided days' worth of testimony with prosecutors. He was a cooperating witness. They aired not yet seen video undercover that Solis got as a cooperating witness of meetings that he had with Madigan, meetings that he had with McGlynn, talking about steering business to Madigan, talking about how McGlynn is a surrogate for Madigan. When Madigan wants something, McGlynn acts on it and talks to people. We saw that video, pretty compelling stuff, especially with Madigan telling Solis that he was going to talk to Pritzker about boards and appointments positions, because Solis was interested in a high-paying, taxpayer-funded board seat, I believe, on the Labor Commission. Interesting to hear in Madigan's words, that I'm going to talk to Pritzker about these things. And this was all during a time when Pritzker was governor-elect. So it was leading up to the November 2018 election, and then after the November 2018 election, when Pritzker got into office, and Madigan told Solis that he was going to put his name in with others to be considered for boards and commissions. But we also heard Madigan ask Solis for a favor. In one of the undercover videos, Madigan says, well, there is something you can do, and talked about a contract that his son Andrew was hoping to get with an organization to do insurance work. And Madigan looked at Solis in the video and said, you guys had a meeting with this group. Andrew hasn't heard anything back. So if you could follow up, just let him see what Andrew can do. So clearly, Solis saying time and again that he's going to help Madigan where he can, and in an effort to kind of, in a way, highlights there was some kind of quid pro quo going on here. So Solis, finishing up his testimony for the prosecution, then had some cross-examination from the defense. They worked to impugn his character and a variety of other things. But after Solis was done, again, on the witness stand for days, they brought on some other individuals who had worked with Madigan in the past, including his former chief of staff, Jessica Basham. Jessica Basham was Madigan's chief of staff after Tim Mapes, who was Madigan's longtime chief of staff, was let go amidst a harassment allegation. Mapes, by the way, he's now serving 30 months in a federal prison for lying to a grand jury that was investigating Madigan and others. So Jessica Basham testifying that, the inner workings of Madigan's office, she was there to confirm handwritten notes that prosecutors presented of action items that Madigan wanted to talk with Pritzker about, everything from minimum wage increases. And again, this is in 2018 heading into 2019, minimum wage increases, gun safety, progressive tax was top of the list. A variety of sports betting was another thing. So kind of seeing some of the inner workings here of the Madigan operation as we continue forward in this case. So there's a lot more to come, Dan. Even more recordings aired throughout this week, undercover calls between Madigan and Basham and McGlynn and others. So one big thing that could happen next week that we're anticipating is current Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski looking to testify for the prosecution. And Budzinski, her name's already been brought up in this, especially this week, because Basham was working with Budzinski, who was part of the governor's transition team heading into the new Pritzker administration 2018 into 2019. So before she became a congresswoman, she worked for the Pritzker administration. And Basham and Budzinski were going back and forth on scheduling and such. So imagine that we're going to hear a little bit more detail about that from Budzinski. Again, a sitting U.S. congresswoman set to testify in this long corruption trial involving the former Illinois House Speaker and co-defendant Mike McGlynn, working to steer business towards Madigan's law firm in exchange for favorable legislation or other deals. There's a lot more that's yet to come, Dan.
Yeah, Greg, we're now, I think it's its 8th week of testimony, not including the jury selection process, was dragged out over nearly 2 weeks. And we're still looking at going possibly into late January or early February. There has been just one witness after another, one secret recording after another. That is a lot for the jury to absorb and remember over the course of this, what could be a 3+ month trial.
And a lot of it has Madigan's voice in it. Right. I mean, Madigan's been sitting in court quietly. His defense attorneys have been the ones talking during the trial and cross-examination and such. McLean's voice also very much audible in the courtroom as they play these undercover recordings. That I think is going to be pretty impactful on the jury, right? Because sometimes if they don't have these types of recordings, then you never really hear the defendant's voices. Well, the jury's getting an earful of the defendant's voices in this case.
Let's just briefly talk about the schedule a little bit. The prosecution said it could wrap up its case as early as next week. Is that correct?
That's what Jim Talamonte, our reporter in the courtroom throughout the duration of this, has indicated that they are ahead of schedule. The prosecution is ahead of schedule. What that means for the defense, I guess we shall see. But the defense indicated that they will be issuing subpoenas for witnesses that they will bring to the witness stand. Who those witnesses will be, not too sure. But obviously, we've got the prosecution case that'll look to rest their case, and then the defense will come in to offer up their defense of these corruption charges ranging from bribery, racketeering, official misconduct, and so on.
And of course, we're in the December holiday season. Thanksgiving is now behind us. As I mentioned, they took Thanksgiving and the day after Thanksgiving off. Christmas is in front of us. What are their plans for Christmas week?
I believe Christmas week is going to be off, so they'll get a little bit of a reprieve for the holidays, but then they'll be back in just after and taking up a lot more of this case.
Let's move along then, Greg. Thank you for the update there. The end of a 30-day hold on federal judge Stephen McGlynn's injunction issued against enforcement of the state's gun ban on more than 170 semi-automatic weapons and magazines over a certain capacity. That's approaching next week. McGlynn ruled the ban was unconstitutional and issued an injunction against it, but he placed that injunction on hold for a month so the state had an opportunity to appeal. Well, that 30 days ends December 8th. Tell us more about what's going on with this.
Yeah, this is a lot of twists and turns in a case that plaintiffs, and especially those who are Second Amendment supporters, are more and more frustrated as the twists and turns continue. This law was put into effect January 2023. As you said, it banned 170 plus semi-automatic firearms ranging from rifles, shotguns, handguns, banned magazines over certain capacities. Also required that if you have one of these banned firearms, then you have to register it. Well, after all the preliminary stuff, the initial phases of this went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court on preliminary grounds. Earlier this year, Justice Clarence Thomas said, it's not ready yet, and put it back to the district court, where the district court held a 4-day bench trial. And then last month, we had a ruling from McGlynn, again, an injunction saying that it's an unconstitutional law. It violates the Second Amendment, violates the 14th Amendment. The entire thing's unconstitutional. Well, he put a stay on that, as you said. It's a hold on his injunction for 30 days. The state then appealed, and the appeals court, and this is where it starts to get some weird twists and turns. The appeals court said that the district court's order was not clear enough. It didn't follow a certain rule of sorts. So the appeals court asked the litigants, why shouldn't the appeals court put a narrow remand back to the district court for a more clear order? But then the states filed their position for a stay pending appeal, and then the appeals court's like, okay, well, here's the second thing now. We have to debate this stay. So before Thanksgiving, the litigants filed their briefs, and then this Monday they filed their briefs for the other issue of whether or not the stay should be issued. We're waiting now. We're in a phase where it's unclear what the appeals court's going to do. Are they going to remand the case back down to the lower court to get a clearer order? Are they going to issue a stay if they do that? That's what the state wants. The state replied and said, we don't need to bring this back to the district court, but if the appeals court does, please issue a stay. Hold the injunction from kicking in December 9th, which is Monday. The plaintiffs in this case, they said they don't really see a reason for it to be sent back to the district court, but if they do, if the appeals court does, so be it. But they also argued that a stay on McGlynn's ruling would harm those wanting to exercise their Second Amendment rights to keep and bear arms. They say the real status quo, which is really what you're trying to preserve if there is a stay issued, They say the real status quo was before January of 2023 when the gun ban was not in place. So all of this, we're waiting. We're watching. I just looked at the docket for the appeals court before we started recording on this Thursday afternoon. No updates there. Will this ruling on either of these two issues to put it back to the district court for a clearer ruling, and also whether or not there's a stay pending appeal? Will we find this out Friday at 6:00 in the evening? Will it come, over the weekend? These things, obviously, us being news hounds, we're watching closely, and I would encourage people to get the latest at thecentersquare.com.
I'm going to briefly put you on the spot, Greg. What are your expectations that's going to happen with the Monday deadline looming?
Oh, boy. I really think that there may be a stay issued, and then the court may ask the district court for some clarity before they move forward. When that stay comes, again, is it going to be Friday when everybody buttons up and goes home? All of a sudden it happens, or are we going to see it issued on Monday morning? If it's not issued, then essentially the law is enjoined from being enforced. So that could create an issue with firearms retailers seeing an influx of people coming in wanting to purchase. So will that level of what the state might see as uncertainty be injected into this? Big question. Not really clear at this time. But Dan, there's something else too. It doesn't deal with Illinois' gun ban. Maryland's gun ban has gone through the district court, the appeals court, and is now on final judgment in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. They're going into conference December 13th to determine whether or not they're going to take this case and hear it at their next scheduled oral arguments. Now, they could relist it, but we could find out soon if they're going to take a case dealing with a state banning firearms on final judgment. If they take that, it could mean Illinois' case is essentially put on hold while the U.S. Supreme Court deals with these questions. So a lot of people wanting to see what happens here, and we've got the latest reporting at thecentersquare.com.
Thank you, Greg. And if the U.S. Supreme Court does take up the case, I kind of expect the main case, I kind of expect them to take it up. That could push any decision on this stuff out till May or June. The U.S. Supreme Court generally doesn't issue rulings, not across the board, but generally until the end of their term in May and June. So this still could be months away from any clarity.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, and something I think has people a little frustrated with how slow these types of cases can go, especially when it deals with fundamental constitutional civil liberties.
Moving on, Greg, we've written a lot at thecentersquare.com, and you and I have talked about this a lot on Illinois in Focus, on the migrant crisis Chicago has faced over the last couple of years, with the incoming President-elect Donald Trump taking over and vowing to close the border, to conduct mass deportations, particularly of criminal foreign nationals who are in the country illegally. Two of the biggest cities in the country, both with the Democratic mayors, are taking different approaches to how they're going to work with President-elect Trump when it comes to the deportation plan. You wrote about that this week. Tell us.
We are going to see some really fascinating storylines on this issue of Donald Trump, president-elect, coming into office, his agenda, everything from, tax cuts to securing the border to tariffs on foreign countries that don't, try to work for border security or don't prioritize the U.S. dollar. We're going to see a lot of conflict between states and jurisdictions run by Democrats and a Congress that's run by Republicans after January, and a White House that has Donald Trump back in the office. This became clear, obviously, leading up to the election, and now it's even more so after the election, especially as we see some of the names that Trump's appointed to his various cabinet positions. Top of mind, Tom Homan. He's going to be handling border security. Tom Homan is very vocal on saying to governors and mayors who oppose mass deportations to get out of the way, even threatening arrest. So what we've seen is a contingent of residents in Chicago addressing the Chicago City Council regularly now. It's every time they meet during public comments, some same faces, some new faces getting up there and chastising the administration of Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson for his position on this. Johnson's not bent. He's essentially said Chicago will remain a welcoming city. Chicago will remain a sanctuary for migrants seeking, shelter. He's gone as far as to say that ICE, Chicago police will not be turning into ICE agents. That's not a way that he says you can build trust in the community. But the residents are fed up. They've gotten up that one individual held up an orange jumpsuit and said, Johnson, you're going to be convicted. Others demanding that ICE come to Chicago first. Upset of the idea of increasing taxes on Chicagoans to possibly pay for more services for non-citizen migrants. So there's a lot of frustration in Chicago. On the other side of the country, in New York City Mayor Eric Adams this week, he said that people can cancel him if he wants, because he wants to work with the incoming Trump administration to find out how to go after violent non-citizen immigrants. And in particular, Adams was clear to delineate the difference between those, and he even characterized those dreamers, those who came across the border with their parents when they were really young, and now they're 25 and, thriving in the community, right? He says that's not who we should go round up in the middle of the night. But if people who rape, shoot at police, harm our individuals, harm our other migrants, they need to be removed from this country. So Eric Adams making that very clear, and even upset and saying that people need to be frustrated and upset with the Biden administration for forcing New York to spend $6.4 billion on the migrant crisis. That's money that could have paid for more police, more teachers, more services for seniors. So Adams is very upset by that, and clearly saying, hey, we don't want to go after the dreamers, but we need to go after the violent criminals. And he's willing to work with the Trump administration on that. Johnson was asked earlier this week, what about that delineation? The difference between those who are here as productive members of society versus those who are here violent criminals. Johnson didn't take the same tack that Adams took. And again, that's something I think that Chicago residents are growing in frustration, seeing time and again, of Johnson taking a more ideological position on this issue rather than a practical one of public safety and trying to go after non-citizens in this country illegally with criminal convictions for a whole host of things.
Definitely an interesting contrast. Two of the Democratic mayors of the first largest city in New York City and the third largest city in Chicago, diametrically opposed on this issue. And of course, with Trump taking office in just a little over a month, things could play out fairly quickly. Here, Greg, in just a short period of time we have left, I want to talk about one more story, and that's Illinois' high, particularly compared to the national average unemployment rate. New numbers came out recently in October. Illinois' unemployment rate was 5.3%. That's compared to a 4.1% national unemployment rate.
5.3%. That's a full point and more above the national average of 4.1%. Illinois has traditionally lagged the national unemployment rate. Even before the Great Recession, clearly the state has things that are holding it back. The governor recently said, Illinois is the heart of the country. We have a lot of intermodal traffic from, cargo ships to the rail system that we've got through Illinois. It's a really robust transportation and logistics hub. So you would think with that, things would be, rocket fuel, but here we are, with a lower unemployment, or with a higher unemployment rates than any state that we touch, and the third highest unemployment rate in the country. Clearly something's wrong here.
Only California and Nevada have higher unemployment rates nationwide than Illinois does. Greg, thank you for joining us today. Listeners can keep up with all of the stories we talked about and more at thecentersquare.com.